Number 10. The Punisher. In the early 2000s, Punisher faced off with Wolverine in Punisher number 16 and 17. Essentially, the Punisher found himself in the crosshairs of Logan, and he needed to buy himself some time without Wolverine getting in his way. To do this, Punisher blows off Wolverine's face with a bit of buckshot in Punisher number 16. Now, thanks to his healing factor, Logan is still standing with his face already starting to heal over his exposed adamantium skull. So obviously, that didn't buy the Punisher much time at all. Instead, in Punisher number 17, Frank Castle makes things just a little bit more below the belt. Literally, as he wiped Wolverine's gonads off of the playing field in a similar way to how he took off Wolverine's face. But of course, even this won't stop the mutant, so Frank Castle resorts to even more drastic measures. Needing the means to give himself a day or two at least before Logan will start coming after him again, the Punisher uses a steamroller to slowly but completely flatten Logan, and then he parks it there and walks off to do his business. If anything, I think this is kind of a testament to how powerful Wolverine actually is, but still, it happened. It was cool. Number 9. Spider-Man. It should be obvious, but you don't dare insult Mary Jane to Peter's face. In Amazing Spider-Man issue number 522, Peter is awoken with a call about a newspaper article claiming that Mary Jane had a little, entanglement, we shall say, with Tony Stark. Now obviously this is not true, and actually it was a setup by a villain, but that's not the point right now. Peter gets out of his bed in Stark Tower and goes looking for his wife. Along the way, he runs into Wolverine in a room with a very lovely high-up view of the city. Now, Logan decides to start going on about how Mary Jane messed up big time, and after a warning from Peter to stop, he decided to comment on her lack of brains. This lovely little comment gets him thrown through unbreakable glass and a really colorful way to catch a cab. Number 8. The Hulk. The first rivalry Wolverine ever had in comic book history is with the Incredible Hulk. The Hulk is basically just a ball of increasingly strong muscle, and he just gets more and more strong the longer the fight goes on, and the more mad he gets. He can dish out basically untold amounts of damage. As for Wolverine, he can take untold amounts of damage, almost always coming back thanks to his incredible healing factor. Their rivalry began with the Incredible Hulk number 181 when Wolverine was first ever introduced, coming in between the Hulk and the Wendigo. Then in the Incredible Hulk number 340, Wolverine takes on the Grey Hulk, going into a berserker rage, ripping into the Hulk like never before. It is awesome to see, that is, until the Hulk heals and makes Wolverine one with the ground. The worst time Hulk defeated Wolverine though would have to be in a different universe, specifically the Ultimate Universe. Here, the Hulk, who was honestly a bit more of a villain to be honest, managed to completely rip Wolverine in half and toss the bottom half far, far away, giving Wolverine the challenge of trying to travel with half a body to reclaim his legs. Number 7. Beast. For the longest time, I actually thought that Beast was one of the better heroes out there, and that's because I didn't know Beast, apparently. Beast is a dick. Dr. Hank McCoy is one of the 8 smartest people in the world, and being smart in comic books seems to be a pretty easy path to being morally dubious. Don't get me wrong, Wolverine isn't a Boy Scout by any stretch of the imagination, but he still holds his morals. Wolverine and Beast were actually friends. Beast stuck with Wolverine during the Schism event, and he was also on the side of the Avengers with Wolverine during the Avengers vs. X-Men. But despite that, in order to deal with external threats to the new mutant nation of Krakoa, Beast has taken a position as the chief of the intelligence agency X-Force, which has almost completely cost him his morality. McCoy has chosen some questionably authoritarian actions to guarantee the Krakoan sovereignty, like sabotaging the country of Terra Verde, squirreling away funds to open a space station prison, and interrupting one of Wolverine's resurrections to attach an obedience collar to him and send him on clandestine operations, all of which was kept secret from the rest of X-Force. This ticked off Wolverine, which in turn ticked off Beast even more. He sent Wolverine on a mission so that he would be captured for an auction that Hank attended, and then he literally showed Wolverine to the afterlife in order to resurrect Logan again in a primitive state and turn him into Weapon X. Where Beast sent him on more missions, Beast has become a literal villain, and he just keeps getting worse and worse as time goes on. Number 6. Gambit. As is usually the case between two popular characters, the Raging Cajun, Gambit, and Wolverine have each actually scored a couple wins over each other, but one of the most humiliating defeats fell squarely on Wolverine's hairy shoulders. In Uncanny X-Men number 273, the two heroes decided to face off in the Danger Room, the X-Men's training facility, so obviously they weren't out to end the other's life or anything, but the only thing on the line here was pride, and Wolverine absolutely lost some this day. Though they initially looked evenly matched, Gambit gained the upper hand by making the Danger Room conjure up Lady Deathstrike. Logan was so distracted that he didn't realize it was a trick until too late. Gambit got Wolverine with a few staff strikes before knocking Wolverine on his back and pressing his staff to his throat. This even prompted a concerned Jubilee to randomly burst into tears over Wolverine's welfare. Looking at the panel now, it's actually kind of hilarious. Number 5. Captain America. It is no secret that Captain America is the most decorated soldier in the Marvel Universe. This is owing to his enhanced abilities, but it's mostly due to his experience, guts, and heart. He and Wolverine have had their fair share of battles, with the first one as early as 1941, and Cap's usually come out on top. A large reason for Cap's ability to defeat Logan probably has to do with his discipline, as Logan tends to go berserk way too often in a fight, which leaves him prone to making a mistake his opponent can capitalize on, and that's all that Captain America is about. It is also worth noting that Captain America was the original Weapons Plus. He is basically the granddaddy to the source of half of Wolverine's power and training. We gotta imagine that Cap has got a huge advantage over old Wolvie here. He even beat the snot out of Wolverine when Cap was turned into a werewolf, picking up Wolverine and chucking him into a group of other werewolves like he was a bowling ball. Number 4. Daredevil. During the Enemy of the State storyline, Wolverine challenged a lot of superheroes. During this fight, Logan was being forced to go after Daredevil in his own home. Now Logan was really being guided to take on Daredevil in the hopes of drawing out Elektra, but the fight wasn't as easy as Logan's controllers were likely hoping it would be. Even with the surprise attack in his own home, Daredevil was quickly ready for the fight. The odds were further stacked against Daredevil because Logan had brought along over a dozen of his new friends who happened to be ninjas armed with bows and swords. Daredevil handled it just like a video game and took out the nameless goons before moving on to the big old boss. But even then, he was just looking to get through to Logan rather than just taking him down. Daredevil did have home field advantage though, obviously knowing his own home. So when he got knocked down, he knew his weight set was nearby and he just smacked Logan in the face with a dumbbell. The blow was enough to break through the mind control long enough that the fight came to an end for the time being. Number 3. The Thing. The Thing is one of the most powerful heroes in the Marvel Universe, able to stand toe-to-toe with the Hulk in battle. He and Wolverine have had their scrapes, and most of the time, Logan's been on the losing side. In one little altercation taking place in Fantastic Four 1961, issue number 374, Wolverine, Ghost Rider, Professor Hulk, and Spider-Man, who had previously taken the place of the Fantastic Four temporarily, were hunting for Johnny Storm, who had accidentally destroyed part of Empire State University. This led to an altercation between the four heroes and the actual Fantastic Four. When Wolverine went to attack Susan, Ben Grimm grabbed the Canadian and slammed him into the ground, calling him an arrogant little creep. But Wolverine in his rage used all his might and slashed Ben across the face, famously disfiguring the character. But the Thing got his payback as he yells, "You freaking little psycho," and then he whacks Wolverine with one punch, sending him flying through not only the wall, but through the adjacent building and straight into the next one over. Number 2. Deadpool. Deadpool and Wolverine first met in 1994's Wolverine number 88. While Wolverine may be stronger, Deadpool's speed, healing factor, his skill in combat, and his absolutely buck-wild behavior has allowed him to get the drop on Wolverine multiple times and do a lot of damage many different times. In their first ever encounter, the Merc with the Mouth ambushes Wolverine while he's checking up on Garrison Kane, another Weapon X experiment. Now during the ensuing fight, Deadpool earned his reputation as one of Marvel Comics' most brutal mutants by stabbing his two swords into Wolverine's heart and lungs. Now while this typically would not phase the healing mutant, Wolverine had actually recently lost his healing factor during a bout with Magneto. Thankfully for Wolverine, his healing factor had begun to slowly return in the days leading up to this fight with Deadpool, allowing him to survive the wounds he'd suffered and win a rematch, but he did need help to do that. And finally, in at number 1 today, it's Spock. There have been a few characters that have stopped Wolverine in one move, but this one really comes out of left field. In a crossover between the X-Men and Star Trek, Logan faced Mr. Spock. Faced is kind of giving Wolverine too much credit though. Upon boarding the Starship Enterprise, Wolverine moved to attack Spock, only to discover that Spock, one, not only knew who Wolverine was, but Wolverine also discovered the effects of the Vulcan nerve pinch. In literally one quick move, Spock used the nerve pinch to knock Wolverine to the ground almost instantly. It's another case of skill winning against brute strength, and that's why Wolverine needs to learn a little finesse. And that's all I got. Thank you guys so much for watching today on Top 10 Nerd. I'm your host, Adam Andrews, and I will catch you all on the flippy flop. But until then though, be safe and peace out, you nerds. Whoop, whoop. Number 10, the Hulk. Now we're starting off this list with a big one. I could have easily chosen all of my spots from when Deadpool killed the Marvel Universe, but while Deadpool has defeated the Hulk and many others, that's not actually canon. But luckily, we do have a canon example of when Deadpool defeated the Hulk. This took place in the 1997 volume of Deadpool in issue number 4, when Deadpool needed to challenge the Hulk to get some of his blood in order to counteract the gamma radiation that was affecting Deadpool. The Hulk at this time was making Duck Key his own little paradise, and Deadpool, scared out of his wits, went in this fight just trying to ask for some of the green stuff coursing through the Hulk's veins. Unsurprisingly, the Hulk was not about it. After trying his darndest to get what he wanted, the Hulk was just a bit too much for Wade to handle, so he came up with a cunning plan. As the Hulk jumped up into the air, probably planning to squash Wade when he came back down, Deadpool positioned a broken post on the ground just so perfectly that the Hulk wound up impaling himself right on it when he landed. Now normally this isn't supposed to be possible, and Deadpool makes note of that fact, but apparently the Hulk was a little sick at this point in time, and Wade gets what he wants and gets the heck out of Dodge while he still has the chance. Number 9, Black Panther. So basically what happens here in Black Panther vs. Deadpool number 4 is that Mr. Poole heads to Wakanda to steal a bit of vibranium to help heal a mailman. Yes, that is the actual reason. Okay, so Black Panther manages to de-head the Merc and then put him back together, restraining him and going through his stuff, particularly his utility belt pouches, in a Wakandan lab. Now as these two are having a very entertaining back and forth, Deadpool reveals that he has pulled a fast one on T'Challa, as he has some C4 in one of those pouches on a timer that is about to go off. Which it does, since there are way too many pouches for T'Challa to find it in time, which is hilarious. Wade actually ends up grabbing a red ceremonial Wakandan necklace and putting it on. Now this was actually a prototype Panther habit. The suit analyzes his DNA, and since Black Panther has everybody's DNA on file, it bestows itself onto Deadpool. It remakes itself on Deadpool, adapting to his usual color scheme and the weapons that he likes to use, christening himself Pantherpool, or Dead Panther. No, Pantherpool. Pantherpool's better. It also pretty much brings him up to par with the true Black Panther, which is proven when the two get into a bit of fisticuffs, until Wade's pocket-sized teleporter activates and he teleports to the Great Mound, aka the Vibranium Mine of Wakanda, which he then accidentally teleports to right outside New Jersey, the whole mountain. Number 8, Wolverine. Deadpool and Wolverine first met in 1994's Wolverine number 88. Now while Wolverine may be stronger, Deadpool's speed, healing factor, his skill in combat, and his absolutely buck-wild behavior has allowed him to get the drop on Wolverine and do a lot of damage many different times. In their first ever encounter, the Merc with a Mouth ambushes Wolverine while he's checking up on Garrison Kane, who's another Weapon X experiment. Now during the ensuing fight, Deadpool earned his reputation as one of Marvel Comics' most brutal mutants by stabbing his two swords into Wolverine's heart and lungs. Now while this typically wouldn't phase the healing mutant, Wolverine had recently lost his healing factor during a bout with Magneto. Now thankfully for Wolverine, his healing factor had begun to slowly return in the days leading up to this fight with Deadpool, allowing him to survive the wounds he'd suffered and win a rematch later on, but he even needed help to do that. It was brutal. Number 7, Daredevil. Now, I wasn't able to find and read the actual comic that this page comes from, but I do know it is in Marvel Now issue number 11, so if you can give me more context to this moment, feel free to do so down in the comments. Essentially, Daredevil had managed to capture Wade and hog tie him up. As Daredevil is talking with some civilians, Daredevil breaks his own fingers to escape from his confines. He then asks Daredevil where the nearest hospital is. That would be Mount Sinai Medical Center, about 5 blocks away from where they were. Deadpool tells DD that he better get a move on, as Deadpool then, out of nowhere, blasts one of the civilians in the leg. Now Daredevil is obviously pretty peed off about this, as Deadpool damaged the civvy's femoral artery, but luckily for Daredevil, Deadpool heard Mount Sinai Medical Center is about 5 blocks away. As Deadpool storms off with Daredevil saying this isn't over, all Deadpool can say back in retort is BRB JK LOL. It's kind of funny, not gonna lie. Number 6, Daredevil again. This time I was able to find and read the actual comic. Yay! Okay, so back in the 1990s, it was quite common for comics to feature iconic duels and let the readers decide the outcomes through a voting system. 1999's Contest of Champions Volume 2 number 4 is a perfect example of this, when Daredevil faces off against Deadpool. Deadpool does not fight fair. We know this to be true from the last point, and Daredevil should too. The problem for Daredevil is that he's just too much of a good guy hero. Deadpool takes complete advantage of that fact by throwing a very tiny, wrapped up, fresh little human off of the roof that the two are fighting on. When Daredevil naturally rushes to save the little one, he goes careening off of the building, catching the wrapped up kid, and he lands in a dumpster. This is when he realizes that the kid was actually not a kid at all, but a doll of Deadpool with a tape recorder of, and I quote, authentic fake baby noisemaker guaranteed to fool superheroes every time, end quote. This is when Deadpool pops up behind Matt Murdock with his fully loaded placed squarely on DD's noggin. Luckily we cut away before Wade finishes the job, but he got him pretty good there. Number 5, Hawkeye. Okay, now to be clear, this isn't actually Hawkeye who Wade is humbling here. This is taking place during the period of time when Norman Osborn is in charge of what he called Hammer, and he has his Dark Avengers. So this is technically Bullseye dressed up as Hawkeye, just so we're clear. Now I've talked about another moment from 2008's Deadpool before, where he and Bullseye fought in a meat factory, and that was also humbling for Hawkeye / Bullseye, but this is on another level. It's also very short and sweet, so that's nice. So in the very next issue, after Bullseye recovers from their last fight in the meat factory, he sets up a trap for Deadpool, who had set up a trap for him. They made a trap for each other. Instead, Deadpool gets very frustrated and just goes out to find Lester on his own. Now driving in a massive truck with huge massive wheels, he passes under a highway bridge where Hawkeye / Bullseye was waiting with a rocket launcher. He fires this at Deadpool, who sees it coming in the rearview mirror, and then he slams on the brakes, drifts the car sideways while rolling down the windows, allowing the rocket to just smoothly fly through the cab of the vehicle and out the opposite window, blowing up in the distance. And all Bullseye / Hawkeye can do is admit how awesome it was. Because it was awesome. It was super cool. Number 4, all of the heroes. Literally all of them. In Marvel's Dark Ages, the awakening of a cosmic war machine known as the Unmaker forced Doctor Strange to create a magically induced electromagnetic pulse that permanently shut down all electronic devices, plunging the world into darkness. Now from the moment the mutant Apocalypse became aware of the Unmaker and the celestial level power the ancient machine possessed, he made it his mission to reawaken it and claim that power for himself. Now knowing that he couldn't accomplish that by himself, Apocalypse kidnapped many of the world's greatest inventors and used the Purple Man's mind control abilities to force them to create a device that would allow him to merge his mind with the Unmakers. Now that is all really hard to follow, and I'm sorry, but when the heroes made their way to Europe, where Apocalypse was doing all of this, they were met by Deadpool, who acted as their guide, bringing them all the way to Apocalypse's setup in Paris. With Purple Man controlling a whole squad of mind-controlled heroes, the good guys were gonna have a hard time fighting them, except out of nowhere, Deadpool just pops a cap in Purple Man's dome, ending Purple Man's control over not just the heroes fighting them, but the ones inside helping Apocalypse with his machine. Now, Deadpool gets scolded by the other heroes, cause apparently Jessica Jones and Luke Cage were gonna knock Purple Man out, but if they had waited any longer, Apocalypse would have been able to complete his plan, so I'd say that Deadpool was right to do what he did. Number 3, Spider-Man. So kicking off right at the beginning of Deadpool Suicide Kings issue number 4, Deadpool is waking up from a characteristically weird dream where he is Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz with Daredevil, Spider-Man, and Punisher as the Cowardly Lion, Scarecrow, and the Tin Man respectively. That all comes to an end with Tin Man Punisher taking out a little munchkin and Deadpool waking up in the Essex house distraught and met by Daredevil and Spider-Man. Now, in the previous issue, Punisher had just blown the head off of Deadpool, so in his re-healing state, Deadpool is still working to get some of his synapses firing, and Spider-Man makes the little joke of, quote, "So what was your excuse before your head exploded? Ha ha ha," which is kind of funny actually. But then Deadpool says Spidey should be off facing one of his mortal enemies, like the 90-year-old Vulture, or the "hey everyone, I'm really tall, I fight on stilts, Stilt Man," or whatever the hell Gibbon is supposed to be. But then Deadpool goes even more obscure with a reference to the villain Mindworm, who was a big-headed mutant that fed on people's emotions, and then he referenced the kangaroo. Now, of course, Spidey had his own little jabs back, but it kind of feels like when you're the kid getting roasted and you try to come up with anything to try and gain some dignity back and it doesn't work. That's what happened. Number 2, The Punisher. Now, sticking with that same comic, and even actually that same issue, now closer towards the end, Deadpool comes into contact with the Punisher, who, if you remember and were paying attention, it's cool if you weren't, in the previous issue had blown off Wade's head. Now, this was for a crime that Wade did not actually commit, so when they next come to blows inside of a club, Wade is a bit more prepared. Seeing Punisher in a reflection on a mirror, Deadpool is able to give Frank a good old kick in the gut and then send him flying out of one of the club's doors into an alleyway where the fight carries on, and honestly, it's pretty close and a very ruthless fight. Deadpool kind of has the upper hand in his speed, but they both get knocked to the ground. For me, it's the moment where Deadpool is on the ground and he sees Castle as Satan for like a split second. He grabs Punisher by his hair and just slams him face first into the pavement, breaking the guy's nose. In return, Punisher bites off Deadpool's nose, and the whole fight sort of ends in a draw when Punisher finds out Deadpool is innocent and they go off to interrogate some criminals. Now, this is the main humbling moment in my opinion. Frank is interrogating a criminal who is clearly lying, but before Frank can do anything, Deadpool blasts the guy's foot off, and when Frank asks why, Deadpool says, "Because you were going to do it, and this is my book," leaving Frank completely confused as to what's going on. And in at number 1 today, it's Captain America. The villain Dr. Bong was a goofy villain, even during the Golden Age. He has a metal ball where his left hand should be, and he uses it to create concussive blasts by striking the appendage against his bell-shaped head. That's actually what he does. Luckily though, for him, in 2010's Deadpool Volume 2, the villain was reimagined just a smidge more threateningly, having cloned a team of regenerating superheroes and also revealing himself as Deadpool's former therapist. One of these clones was Captain America, so yes, this wasn't the genuine Captain America, but he had the same appearance as the original, and seemingly he had the same abilities as well, and Deadpool sure thought he was the original. The two of these guys fought in a fair bout at first, but Deadpool felt rejected and hurt by Cap in issue number 28. After the fight is interrupted when Deadpool clearly had the upper hand, Dr. Bong demolishes the building they're all in. When everyone comes back to again in the next issue, Deadpool has everyone tied up, including the Captain America clone and the original Captain America. Through some clever interrogation and deductive reasoning about the injuries both of these Caps has sustained, he realizes that one Captain America had healed from his injuries and the other had not, making the first one Cloney McCloneface, and Deadpool blows that face off. It is bad.
Deadpool might seem like a big goofball, but you have to admit, he's got moves. And there are many times when he has used said moves to best shame and insult his peers. Dazzler is a pretty confident person, but even she has had her day ruined by, you guessed it, Deadpool. And after he helped save her, no less. This all went down in Deadpool issue number 31 from the 2013 run on Deadpool. Here Deadpool is in the past where he saves Allison Blair from a bunch of vampires. However, their vamp hunting is not done just yet. But when Deadpool gets an important text, he ends up ditching Daz to deal with an emergency, leaving her to face the rest of the vampire horde solo. While Dazzler kinda just gets left holding the bag there, Wolverine sets himself up for this moment of embarrassment in Wolverine issue number 88. It all goes down when Deadpool decides to pay Garrison Kane a visit at the very same time Wolverine does. Or just before, rather. Wolverine is there to check in on Garrison on behalf of his friend James Hudson, aka Guardian from Alpha Flight, but Deadpool arrived just a bit before before to find Kane so that he might get to his ex, Vanessa Carlyle, who he heard was running around with the cyborg. Deadpool trashes the place, but Garrison and Vanessa are not there, and he can't seem to figure out where they've gone. When Wolverine arrives, he's all wound up and he's ready to fight the old knucklehead, making quick work of him too when Logan leaps over Deadpool, kicking him in the face just as Deadpool comes up underneath the Wolvie and shish kebabs him. Who do you think is a more skilled fighter between the two of these characters? They both have a healing factor, but whose do you think is stronger? Is it one of them, or actually someone else who has the strongest healing factor in comics too? Personally, I think Wolverine's is pretty strong. I also think Wolverine maybe has a better skill set, but no offense, Wade, I think you also got some moves, clearly. Elektra and Deadpool are both members of the Thunderbolts. While working on the team together back in the days of 2013, circa Volume 2 of the Thunderbolts, they didn't always team up together, but when they did, it was honestly a riot. Case in point, Thunderbolts Annual Issue number 1, where we saw them team up together to steal Elsa Bloodstone's Bloodstone Choker. They sneak into Bloodstone Manor, and throughout the heist, Deadpool is constantly in awe of everything Elektra is doing. While his fanboying doesn't seem to faze her, she is bothered by his constant loud exclamations of praise because, you know, being loud while you're trying to sneak around on a heist is usually ill-advised. Needless to say, much to the disappointment of Elektra, they do get caught by Elsa and her monsters, and are locked up in a dungeon with the most unruly monsters in her manor, the ones who can't be redeemed or reasoned with. That's what happens when you team up with Wade on a sneaking mission. It doesn't go well. Deadpool has embarrassed many a team, and he has also embarrassed not just Psylocke, but the entire X-Force team here when he pulled them in the 2012 run of the Deadpool series. Nearer to the end, Deadpool was attempting to get himself killed as he just wanted to basically end everything. To do this, he would need a serum that removed his powers. Weirdly, having his powers removed would also give him a new lease on life that would lead to him not actually wanting to end his life and also make him handsome again. But I digress. To make this happen, he manipulated X-Force into working with him under the guise that they were chasing down someone who had attempted to assassinate him, which was kind of true. At one point, his plan involves having X-Force teleported to a location where they are all confronted by Kingpin's ally, Typhoid Mary, and pretty much like a whole army of the Hand Ninjas. In the very first issue of the third volume of Deadpool from 1997, Wade faces off against his old pal, Dr. Walter Langowski, aka the Alpha Flight team member and hero, Sasquatch. During their fight, not only does Deadpool give Sasquatch a physical run for his money, but he also taunts the heck out of Walter as well. He makes fun of Walter's appearance as Sasquatch, implies that he got busy with Walter's main squeeze Aurora, and threatens to lick Sasquatch's hand. Ew. Despite their feud though, in the end, Deadpool puts himself at risk to take out a nuclear threat. One that he created, but he didn't know how bad it was gonna be. And Sasquatch carries Deadpool to safety, planning to aid in his recovery. And honestly impressed by this albeit dumb but heroic act. When it comes to this next entry on our list, these two are usually my favorite to see team up, as it's constantly a back and forth between them of who is messing with who, and that's what I love to see. They just got great banter. In this instance, we had the Cable/Deadpool annual, where Deadpool, after messing with time travel, royally messes up both his and Nathan's day by putting them in a scenario where, as Cable said, they could very much actually die and they might not survive this. That is how badly Deadpool messed up here. Weirdly impressive considering how powerful both Deadpool and Cable are when they're teamed up together. This is just the beginning of the story too. The rest of the annual is actually used to explain exactly how they got here. I love in medias res storytelling. So good. And if you thought that was embarrassing, nothing's as embarrassing like tricking someone into falling into a giant pile of 372,844 pancakes in the morning, which is exactly what Deadpool did to Domino. This was back in the 2008 run of Deadpool when Wade was looking to join the X-Men. Granted, he did all this to Domino because in his crazy mind, it was a foolproof way to learn if Domino's offer to join the X-Men was really sincere and not just part of a plot to try and eliminate him. He figured if he got rid of Domino and she was there to take him out under the guise of offering him X-Men membership, the X-Men would have sent a backup team with her, which would be deployed destroyed the moment that she was taken out. When no team jumped out to take her place, he instead helped her up out of that big pile of pancakes and then offered her some of them. There's nothing that I love more than a Spider-Man and Deadpool team up, but of course, it wouldn't be complete unless it ended in complete and total embarrassment. For one of the two of our heroes, sure, but usually, of course, for Spider-Man. I mean, Deadpool doesn't get easily embarrassed, so of course, it would be Spider-Man. This went down at the end of their adventure together in Spider-Man/Deadpool issue number 18. Spider-Man and Deadpool here are confronted by their weird hybrid offspring, a clone made from both their genetic material named Itsy-Bitsy. She was dangerous as all heck and even drove Spider-Man to a point where he considered taking her out. However, Deadpool, who at this point had actually been working on becoming less murderous himself, decides to compromise his own newly developing morals to take out Itsy-Bitsy so that he can save Peter from making that mistake and corrupting himself in that way by taking a life. Something Peter very rarely, if ever, actually does in the comics. He is usually a pretty big goody two-shoes. This led to a cute little bromance moment after, involving a conversation about loved ones filling the empty holes inside of us, but of course, the moment was then utterly ruined mid-hug by Deadpool offering to fill Spider-Man's holes anytime. In this next turn of events, Cyclops played right into Wade's hands. This was when Deadpool was given temporary membership to the X-Men, the story that also had all those pancakes that I talked about a few entries ago. It turns out they had only offered Deadpool a place on the team because they wanted to keep a close eye on him. While hurt by this, Deadpool still did his best to play his part as an X-Men, regardless of whether or not his membership was considered to be, real by them, by helping the mutants out. He took the fall for them, and then in the end antagonized Psych so that Psych would actually fight and unmask Deadpool while Wade was wearing his own unofficial X-Men costume that he'd made himself. In the end, while he didn't want to, Cyclops was forced to admit that indeed Deadpool did have moves. Now this next one wasn't the real Captain America, it wasn't even Hydra Captain America. More real though than that version, this was a version of Captain America who at the time was possessed. He had his form taken over by an alien who Deadpool had thought would come to destroy mankind, but who had really come to bring peace to Earth, but by in turn possessing all of Earth's inhabitants and removing free will from them, which would result in peace, but at a pretty high cost, the cost of all of our free will. Deadpool at this time was imbued with cool armor by another entity known as Tiamat, initially prophesied to be the villain in this scenario, but actually aiding and fighting back against the alien entity who had possessed Earth. That's also why Deadpool looks the way he does here, just FYI. While Deadpool struggled with the moral quandary of which was better, peace or free will, Deadpool ultimately decided to choose free will and defeated possessed Captain America by kicking him in a very sensitive area. Doing so in order to, of course, save the world. So weirdly, he was able to save the world by kicking Captain America in a very special place. Number 10, Captain America. Sure, this Captain America wasn't exactly the hero of the story, as we'd later find out the Captain America wasn't really himself, but rather another twisted version that was created by Kobik, fragments of the cosmic cube who fused together to create a sentient being, a little girl. This was due to a misunderstanding where Kobik thought that Captain America would be a better hero if he was basically indoctrinated into Hydra. She hadn't intended necessarily to make him evil, she was just kind of being manipulated by Red Skull, who she actually thought was like a good person, but she was wrong, and she thought Hydra was good. At the same time, Deadpool didn't know any of this and just thought Cap was Cap. He decided to ally himself with Captain America during the events leading up to Secret Empire, but would eventually come to realize that Captain America, aka Hydra Supreme, had really been using and manipulating him. Probably the worst and most humbling of all on our list. This made Deadpool question virtually all of his actions during this period. Not like a punch you in the face humble, but definitely a form of humbling. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, I encourage you, yes you, to click that like button. It really does help us out here at the channel and it feeds the algorithm. Praise be the algorithm. Number 9, Agent Coulson. So he didn't really get beaten by Agent Coulson, but I think considering the fallout of Secret Empire for Deadpool in retrospect, he would have been humbled by, I guess, his actions against Phil Coulson. And sure, Phil Coulson isn't always a hero in the comics. Let's not forget when he ended up being kind of one of the big bads during the 2021 Heroes Reborn event. That was honestly weird for me to read, but mostly I'd say that Phil Coulson tends to be a hero, like in general. And in this case, he really was trying to be a hero. He had intel on Captain America and believed that Stephen had been compromised, and he was right. He was hoping to get this info out so, something could be done before it was too late, but it turned out that Rogers was onto him and sent Deadpool to take out Coulson. While Deadpool was ultimately successful in his mission, it wasn't easy for him to follow this order as he didn't really even know why Captain America needed Phil dead. Later on, he'd learned the truth about Captain America's allegiance when he became Hydra Supreme, and how this Captain America wasn't the same one that we'd always known. This would make Deadpool question everything he'd done during this era, including of course this initial mission for Cap, where it all started, baby. Number 8. Cyclops. Cyclops ended up humbling Deadpool when he refused his offer to become an X-Men member. However, Cyclops would kind of agree to offer Deadpool a place on the team temporarily. But Deadpool would later learn that this was actually only done so that the X-Men could keep an eye on Wade, as basically they didn't trust him. Ouch. After he learned that, after everything he went through to try to help them, he was basically just like, you know what? I don't need you guys. Oh. Poor Wade. So he's left out of the X-Men club. Number 7. Hulk. This one at least isn't too embarrassing for Deadpool, considering he literally wanted to be beaten here. Hulk ended up fighting Deadpool in the 2008 Deadpool series in issue number 38 and 39, and Deadpool actually wanted Hulk to smash him. No, not smash him like that. Although for Deadpool saying this to Hulk, I mean, you maybe never know which version he meant. If he asked you to smash him, you'd be like, wait. Even for Hulk, I feel like I could see the two of them together. Is that weird? I don't know. Deadpool basically wanted to be destroyed, so he told the Hulk that the only way to stop bombs from going off was to beat him up. Deadpool claimed he had a transmitter surgically implanted inside him that would use the electrical current of his body to power itself, sending signals to a new nuke every hour to detonate. Of course, none of this was true. He was just hoping the Hulk would take him out permanently. Unfortunately for Deadpool, despite intentionally losing the fight, his healing factor still went out here. Number 6. Squirrel Girl. I mean, it was only a matter of time, right? They don't call Doreen Green unbeatable for nothing. This fight went down mainly as the result of a miscommunication between the two. Deadpool thought that Squirrel Girl wasn't registered under the Superhuman Registration Act. However, before they could have a discussion and clear things up between them, first, they, of course, had to fight. Normally, Deadpool is a lot better at fighting than he was here, but as he sometimes does, and as many of us do, he got distracted. He became obsessed with Squirrel Girl's appearance and became fixated on guessing her superhero name and the reason why she appeared to be a woman-squirrel hybrid. His distracted state gave Doreen the advantage she needed to beat him. And then afterwards, they of course were able to talk it out and resolve the miscommunication. Sometimes you gotta swing a few punches first and then sit down and have a little chat. Number 5. Daredevil. Daredevil is not a hero I personally would want to go up against, especially if I was Wade at this time and I was like basically a shapeshifter who looks super questionable. Deadpool underestimated Daredevil and was quickly put in his place. Despite attempting to explain himself, Daredevil still decided to restrain Deadpool, leaving him defeated and bound in the middle of the street at the end of their fight. Number 4. Thor. Deadpool used to love dressing up as Thor, but while people say imitation is the best form of flattery, let's keep in mind that this is a Midgardian saying and not an Asgardian one. I don't even know what the sayings or idioms of Asgard are. Eternal life is like an apple? Is that one of them? It would make sense. So of course, when Thor came across Deadpool impersonating him, he was not too pleased. And look, Deadpool is a pretty gifted fighter and also has that healing factor on lock, but he's not nearly, not even close to as powerful as Thor is. Not by a long shot. So of course, no one was surprised when Thor made pretty quick work of Deadpool with his hammer Mjolnir. Number 3 is Spider-Man. Spider-Man even beat Deadpool at his own games. Deadpool sometimes operates on a different level than most other superheroes, or rather anti-heroes in the Marvel Universe. There have been times when he fights simply with the power of his mind. And I don't mean that he's telekinetic or is a psionic powerhouse or anything like that. I mean with his ability to break the fourth wall and escape into a fantasy land, which often manifests somehow in reality. I don't know how that works, but it's a thing. This is what happened when Deadpool fought Spider-Man in the Ultimate Spider-Man animated series. Here, Deadpool was attempting to get a list from Spider-Man that would be extremely valuable if put in the wrong hands, making Deadpool a bunch of money. And as a mercenary, we all know Deadpool does love his money. The two fought, and Deadpool ended up using the power of his imagination to try and defeat Spider-Man. But fortunately, Spider-Man, master of quips and puns that he is, was able to turn the tables on Deadpool, hitting him with a book of morals, literally, that made Deadpool reflect on his origins and feel real feelings, which ultimately cost him the fight. Although he refused to be taken into fury by Spider-Man, Deadpool did admit that their fight was going to make him go home and cry himself to sleep. So there is that. Number 2, Wolverine and Sabretooth. Okay, so Sabretooth isn't really a superhero, but sometimes in the comics he has actually been good. Did you know that? Like during Axis, when many heroes and villains had their alignments reversed. Sabretooth was one of the characters whose alignment stayed permanently reversed after the events of Axis. It wouldn't be till later, after he had sacrificed himself in order to save his son, that he would get turned back to his original alignment and become evil again. In the version of the story I'm talking about though, Sabretooth was not really a good guy. Because yeah, we're talking about X-Men Origins Wolverine, the film. Yeah, that film. But I still wanted to include Sabretooth in this point because, as I said, he isn't always so bad, and in this fight, he and Wolverine are actually forced to team up to take down Wade Wilson, who becomes the strangest version of Deadpool we've ever seen on screen as Weapon 11. As Weapon 11, Wade had no mouth to make quips with, and instead of having his 2 katanas, he had 2 swords just in his arms. He made for a very weird opponent who also was super hard to defeat, surprisingly, but with Wolverine and Sabretooth both coming out against him, Logan was able to find a window to take him down. Number 1, Cable. Well, these two have had a ton of goofy fights too, and also have had a ton of honestly sweet moments in the comics. This was actually a pretty serious fight that happened between them. It went down during Civil War I. This all happened as a result of Deadpool and Cable being on different sides of this first Civil War. Deadpool ended up on the side of pro-registration and went around trying to round up heroes who refused to register. However, then he came across Cable, who attempted to try and talk Wade out of making this mistake. Deadpool, however, of course, would not listen to reason, and the two were forced to fight one another. Deadpool fired darts at Cable, but Cable's shield caused them to rebound back, making them hit Deadpool, so yeah, Deadpool ended up losing this one. And also, he was kinda on the losing side of that Civil War, to be honest with you. Deadpool is bad luck when it comes to like, which side are you gonna choose? Number 10, kills. One of the worst things about Wolverine in general, but also maybe one of the best things, is that he kills. Or more now that he's willing to kill, I guess. Although back in the day, he really did kill pretty indiscriminately. And like I said, it was basically what made him one of the worst, while also being the best at what he does. Although, as Wolverine has even said himself, what he does isn't usually very nice. Now Wolverine is more reserved to maiming those he comes up against, only really killing those who he feels really deserve it, who are beyond redemption. But even then, the fact that Wolverine thinks he gets to decide those folks' fate could be seen as, well, pretty problematic. I mean, Wolverine's a pretty good dude all around, but I still don't think, even as a hero, that he should get the judgment call on who lives and who dies. You know what I mean? It definitely makes him a way more complex and interesting character. I will say that, so it is good in that way. Number 9, almost killed an innocent. During his first long-running Wolverine series, Wolverine at one point must face off against Lady Deathstrike. The first time around that this happens in the series is back in the past, after Wolverine has seemingly traveled back in time via a picture. It makes a lot more sense if you read the story, but it's basically what happens. While attempting to escape Lady Deathstrike and defeat the German World War II soldiers who have infiltrated the part of Spain Wolverine is in, he and the rebels are faced with the decision of what to do with a young prisoner who has seen too much and could cause them to be captured if he's forced to talk. Prisoner's name is Jamie, by the way. I didn't write that down, but I know that, just in case you're wondering. One of the options on the table is to simply take out the prisoner, Jamie, but because of his age, Wolverine ultimately helps to let the boy go and set him free. However, for a small moment there, it is implied that Wolverine has basically made the other choice and decided to kill the prisoner rather than let him walk free, with a promise that he won't tell anyone what he has seen or heard about where the rebels are headed. It's a very shocking moment where you're like, wait, did that just happen? Don't worry, it didn't happen. Oh, it only almost happened. The notion was entertained, and that I think is still pretty bad. Number 8. Relationship with Squirrel Girl. Wolverine's relationship with Squirrel Girl, as was established in New Avengers, might be considered by some to be one of the worst things he's ever done, or that was ever done to him as a character, I guess. This is likely because Squirrel Girl, aka Doreen Green, is often depicted as being from a different generation entirely than Wolverine, and that's not even considering that he's actually even older than he appears, and then the generation that he first appeared in. Squirrel Girl and Wolverine were implied to have had a romantic relationship in the 2010 New Avengers series in issue number 7, and many consider it to be pretty odd. And I gotta say, the way it's also kind of weirdly like shoehorned in there, you're like, what? Why is this in here? What purpose narratively does this really give us? And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists about Wolverine, then be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Goodness knows he's done a lot of bad things. Even Wolverine would say that though. He'd be like, I got a lot of things in my closet. I got a lot of skeletons in my closet, bub. Number 7. Killed Jean Grey. Wolverine has done this on multiple occasions, and in one instance, kinda killed Jean on repeat, stuck on a loop of death after she refused to stay dead thanks to the resurrection powers of the Phoenix Force. Initially, Wolverine killed Jean out of mercy to save her from a gruesome death, burning up as they were in a space shuttle that was rapidly getting closer and closer to the sun. However, this death was actually quite helpful, as it allowed Jean to at least regenerate, unlocking her full potential as the Phoenix, which meant that she could actually then save them, so yay! And surprisingly, she also wasn't even mad about Wolverine killing her. Bonus! I'd be pretty mad, to be honest. It'd be like, wow, you just killed me. That's pretty shady, man. But I guess when you're like, but you unlocked my full potential, it's like, well, alright. Shortly thereafter, Jean would be killed permanently by Magneto, but years later would return again, only to have Wolverine, afraid of the potential of Dark Phoenix, along with the rest of the X-Men, kill her on repeat for a while by stabbing her through with his claws until he realized this wasn't exactly having the same effect that he'd hoped, as the Phoenix Force basically just kept rezzing Jean, so doesn't always work out. Still, that's a lot of Jean deaths. That is, I think, at least 9 Jean deaths total. I think 8 stabbies the one time, 1 stabby the other time. A lot of deaths. A lot of deaths without any actual death, actually, now that I think about it. Number 6. Got even with the Punisher. So the Punisher has done some pretty heinous things to Wolverine over the years in their ongoing fight for who can be the most edgy. This has less to do with Wolverine and Punisher feuding within the comics, and more to do with shots being fired between a few of their passionate writers, Wolverine's Frank Thierry and Punisher's Garth Ennis. Now granted, Thierry has also written a few Punisher titles in his time, although I don't think Ennis has ever written a Wolverine titled book, at least not as far as I know, which is surprising to me. But anyways, I digress. In Thierry's 2003 issue of Wolverine, issue 186, Thierry ended up aiming to get revenge on the Punisher for what Garth Ennis had him do in 2002 during his Marvel Knights run on Punisher in issue number 17. Ennis had Punisher brutally attack and maim Wolverine, basically, even going so far as to steamroll him, and some other things, which I don't know if I can even say on YouTube, but they were bad. To get revenge, Thierry had Wolverine imply the Punisher was gay. Doesn't sound so bad until you read it and you see how it's presented, with Logan implying the Punisher is basically lesser or less of a man or a hero because of his possible sexual orientation. Yikes. Maybe don't do that. Maybe don't write that. It's unfortunate because now that's also on Wolverine as a character. Eek. Number 5. Actually killed innocents. Other than Jamie, who Wolverine seemingly almost had killed but then ultimately did not have killed, and the countless other baddies that Wolverine has faced and defeated over the years, there are also other youngsters that Wolverine has been forced to take down. One of the worst moments where Wolverine has been forced to eliminate a youth happens actually outside of the main continuity in the Ultimate Universe, the reality of Earth 1610. Here, Wolverine is sent on a mission to do the X-Men's dirty work by taking out a young mutant who threatens the very rights mutants are basically fighting for. The sad part, really isn't this kid's fault. His mutant power simply manifested without him knowing and caused him to accidentally vaporize the entire residents of his town, including seemingly his high school crush or his girlfriend or sweetheart and his parents. So really feels pretty bad, and you're like, wow, Wolverine, really, wow, that's what you're doing? But he's like, hey, I gotta protect the mutants or something by killing a mutant or something. Seems a little shady, the reasoning there. Number 4. Became Apocalypse. Of course, this one also did not happen in the main continuity, but hey, it still happened, so it still counts. This all went down in Age of Apocalypse, where Wolverine, here known as Weapon X, would fight against Apocalypse for most of his life. At one point, he was part of Magneto's X-Men, but would leave them to rescue Jean Grey, his love, and later his wife, and fight alongside her against Apocalypse in their own way. Eventually, however, Jean was believed to have been killed and Weapon X would become a recluse, only to find out years later that she was actually alive. Dun dun dun. When the Celestials returned to Earth following the death of Apocalypse, James Howlett offered himself to the Celestials in order to prevent the destruction of Earth. However, this caused him to become the very villain he had hated the most, as the Celestials used tech to modify him, giving him great power but basically warping his mind, and causing him to become Apocalypse's heir, known as Weapon Omega. He was basically just like, evolution is what it's all about, baby. People were like, but don't you see? You're Apocalypse now. And he's like, but it's different. I'm trying to save people by killing people. Wait a minute, maybe you're right. Number 3, killed the mongrels. These last few spots are definitely all competitors for the number 1 spot on this list in my opinion. This one is especially bad because the mongrels were actually Wolverine's children, although he didn't know it at the time that he was forced to fight them. They were rounded up by his known son with Itsu, Daken. Daken was working with the Red Right Hand, a group who had a personal vendetta against Wolverine. Daken created the team known as the Mongrels, not even really to defeat Wolverine, despite Daken having trained them himself. It was kind of like a win-win situation for him. Either Wolverine would be killed by the children he didn't know or had forgotten he'd sired over the years, or Wolverine would end up killing them all. The latter was kind of how it went down, and when Wolverine learned that the members of the Mongrels had actually all been his children, and he didn't know that, he was pretty heartbroken. So I guess point 1 for Red Right Hand and Daken. Only sad points for Wolverine. No points for the Mongrels because they died. Number 2, made moves on MJ. So this one is so awful, it of course cannot come from the main canon of Earth 616. Instead, this point comes to us from the alternate reality of Earth 1610, also known as the Ultimate Universe. After Wolverine had she attempted to get back at him by making him telepathically swap bodies with the person he hated the most, which ended up being Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man. Although Jean later says, oh sorry, I didn't know this would happen to you, Peter. Oops. But anyways, while swapped, both heroes struggle to deal with the everyday while occupying each other's bodies. However, Wolverine still manages to find some time to put some moves on MJ. Well, they don't seal the deal. This is really messed up because Mary Jane at this point in time is a teenager and she didn't even know that Peter and Logan had swapped bodies, so she thought that it was just Peter looking for some action instead of the super old at this point thanks to his healing factor X-Men hero Wolverine. Although not a very heroic moment here, Wolverine. What you doing? Don't do that. Number 1, kill Daken. I think one of the worst things you can do as a parent is to kill those you're supposed to be looking out for and taking care of and protecting, even if your son happens to be the often villainous Daken, now commonly referred to by his actual birth/human name, Akihiro. At one point, Wolverine was forced to put down Akihiro during a fight. Akihiro had held a grudge against his old man for years, having been trained by Romulus to hate Logan after being stolen from his mother's womb and raised by Romulus. For years, Wolverine thought his son was dead, not knowing to come searching for Akihiro. But Akihiro was raised to believe he was basically abandoned, and he also grew up in a household where people didn't like him because he was half Japanese and half Canadian, so that was another issue. Thanks to some plotting from the devious and diabolical mind of Victor Creed, aka Wolverine's nemesis Sabretooth, Wolverine was forced into a death match with Daken, a match that ended with Wolverine killing Akihiro, drowning him in a puddle, while sadly thinking of what could have been had Akihiro been given a chance at a semi-normal life, being raised by Wolverine and of course his now deceased mother Itsu. What would it have been like if their life had been happy? We'll never know because he gets drowned in a puddle. But don't worry, Akihiro's alive and well now, so it all fixed itself. And now he and Wolverine are on great terms, so never mind, I guess.
Wolverine is one of Marvel's most savage and ruthless heroes, and that's because the dude has not had a good time from the get-go. I'm about to hit you with a small collection of Wolverine's most brutal moments, but I will be missing a ton, so feel free to leave a comment of any I missed down below. But without further ado, kicking us off today is Marvel's Civil War event. This whole event kicked off because of a guy named Nitro. This villain has the power to explode, and when he did this, hopped up on a new substance, he wiped out the entire town of Stamford, Connecticut. This split the entire superhuman community down the middle, with Tony Stark leading half of them under the idea of superhuman registration, and Captain America leading the other half who opposed this. Wolverine partnered up with the former, and he was given a very specific task: to track down Nitro and bring him to justice. But when Wolverine actually managed to track the guy down, the villain did what he does best. explode. And when it happened here, he managed to completely incinerate Wolverine down to his shiny adamantium bones. But speaking of Wolverine's shiny bones, they did in fact lose their luster at one point, and that was more than brutal enough for this list. In the 1993 crossover event Fatal Attractions, Magneto was offering mutants sanctuary on his ship, the Avalon, and recovering from the legacy virus he was planning to completely wipe out humanity, being opposed only by the X-Men. Xavier, in a special Shi'ar suit, leads the fight against Magneto on Avalon, and Magneto holds everyone off until Wolverine gets the drop on him. Wolverine makes it really close, slicing Magneto across the chest just a little bit too close for comfort, and this pushes Magneto over the edge. He basically turns the adamantium on Wolverine's skeleton into liquid and quite literally pulls it out of his body. It's gruesome. But there is actually more than one character to take on the Wolverine name. X-23's origin story was told in the 2004 miniseries X-23 Innocence Lost, which takes Laura Kinney from conception to independence, and man does she go through the ringer. Laura, unlike most of the other mutants, was created in a lab. This lab was called the Facility, and it's where attempts were being made to clone Wolverine/Weapon X from a recovered sample of his own DNA. The problem is that the sample was incomplete, resulting in constant failures. It was the work of a brilliant geneticist named Sarah Kinney that finally made the project a success when she combined her own DNA with that of the sample to create a genetic replica with near identical powers to the original Wolverine. This clone became labeled X-23, but Sarah secretly named her Laura. X-23 was trained from birth to be an assassin, treated fairly extremely and exposed to a trigger scent that would cause her to lose all control and give in to a brutal rage. The organization used this trigger scent to have her wipe out her sensei, as well as to make money off of her as an 11-year-old super assassin. Now eventually her mother, for lack of a better term, realized that she needed to free Laura. Plus, she also learned that the facility was creating more clones, intending to train them in the same way, and she decided that she needed to take them all out. Thanks to Sarah, X-23 managed to destroy the facility and the clones, but as she escaped, she discovers that the facility have put the trigger scent on her own mother. Sarah ends up being taken out by Laura herself, passing away in her arms before X-23 finally gets to escape. But if we really want to dive into the brutality of Wolverine, we can look directly at Weapon X. A large chunk of Wolverine's life was spent being forced to work for the ultra-shady government group known as Weapons Plus/Weapon X. They are the ones that gave Wolverine those shiny adamantium bones that we talked about at the beginning of the list. Not only did they force Wolverine and many others into nasty experiments to create super soldiers, they then hired out those super soldiers to the highest bidders, brainwashing these people into committing terrible atrocities. For example, Wolverine was forced to steal a boy named Frank Simpson and begin programming him to turn him into an enhanced killer. But then later on in life, Wolverine came across Frank in Vietnam as a soldier, and their interaction was anything but pleasant. Wolverine basically put Frank through the ringer, physically and psychologically breaking him to the point that Frank became a killer and started going by the name Nuke, which is when he became a Daredevil villain. Now, while Wolverine spent time on the X-Men team, he came into contact with one Dr. Hank McCoy, aka Beast. Hank is one of the 8 smartest people in the world, and being smart in comic books seems to be a pretty easy path to being morally dubious. Don't get me wrong though, Wolverine is not a Boy Scout by any stretch of the imagination, but he still holds on to his morals, for the most part. Wolverine and Beast were actually friends, and Beast stuck with Wolverine during the Schism event, and he was also on the side of the Avengers with Wolverine during the Avengers vs. X-Men event. But people change, and Beast is absolutely one of those people. In order to deal with external threats to the new mutant nation of Krakoa, Beast has taken a position as the chief of the intelligence agency X-Force, which has almost completely cost him his morality. McCoy has chosen some questionably authoritarian actions to guarantee the Krakoan sovereignty, like sabotaging the country of Terra Verde, squirreling away funds to open a space station prison, and interrupting one of Wolverine's resurrections to attach an obedience collar to send him on clandestine missions, all of which was kept secret from the rest of X-Force and the rest of the mutants. This ticked off Wolverine, which in turn ticked off Beast even more. He sent Wolverine on a mission so that he would be captured for an auction that Hank attended, and then he literally showed Wolverine to the the afterlife in order to resurrect Logan again in a primitive state and turn him into Weapon X, where Beast sent him on more and more missions. Beast cloned Wolverine, and he used those clones as his own personal bodyguards and hitmen, and man, Beast has just become straight up a villain. No other way to put it. But Beast is nowhere near the most brutal villain that Wolverine has had to face. The Wolverine villain known as Cyber, for example, is one of the only villains to actually terrify Wolverine, with some adamantium-coated skin, toxic claws, and the power to track an individual's brain. And he's like 9 feet tall. In 1994's Wolverine number 79, Cyber is tracking down Wolverine in order to claim his adamantium bones, which he wants to then make a profit from. Unfortunately, at this time, Wolverine actually doesn't have his adamantium bones because Magneto took them away. So when the fight leads to him popping his bone claws, Cyber is a little more than disappointed. But instead of just walking away after this revelation, a cannon just goes off in the distance, and this gives Wolverine the opportunity to slash Cyber across the face. But as soon as the attack happens, Cyber catches Wolverine's fist, and in one stomp, he snaps Wolverine's claws in half, very much like Sabretooth did in Wolverine Origins, like the movie. That event scarred Wolverine, but right after, it made him even question his ability to be a hero in the first place. But moving on from that, the Thing is one of the most powerful heroes in the Marvel Universe, able to stand toe-to-toe with the Hulk in battle. He and Wolverine have had their scrapes, and most of the time, Logan's been on the losing side. In one little altercation taking place in Fantastic Four 1961, issue 374, Wolverine, Ghost Rider, Professor Hulk, and Spider-Man, who had previously taken the place of the Fantastic Four, were hunting for Johnny Storm, who had accidentally destroyed part of Empire State University. Now this led to an altercation between the four heroes and the Fantastic Four, but when Wolverine went to attack Susan Storm, Ben Grimm grabbed the Canadian and slammed him into the ground, calling him an arrogant little creep, because that's just what he does. But Wolverine, in his rage, used all of his might and he slashed Ben across the face, disfiguring the character in a huge way. Now the Thing got his payback as he yelled, "You frickin' little psycho," and then he whacks Wolverine with one punch, sending him flying through a bunch of buildings, but this actually scarred the Thing so bad that it had lasting effects throughout the comics. The post-apocalyptic world featured in the Old Man Logan storyline is one of the best things that Marvel has given us. But it's also one of the most brutal settings they've ever created. It all came to be when the villains decided that instead of fighting their usual villains, who they always lose to, they would instead put themselves up against whatever hero they were actually best suited to face. Now in the case of Wolverine, who is the main character here, that happened to be Mysterio. Mysterio is a master of creating illusions that trick even the senses, and he is almost always defeated by Spider-Man because of his spider sense. But for Logan, his super senses are one of his key traits, so when Mysterio uses his illusions to trick those senses into believing that the X-Mansion was being attacked by Doc Ock, Ulysses Klaue, Strife, and a whole squad of powerful villains, Wolverine believed it wholeheartedly and he held nothing back. Using his claws, he cut through the villains like butter. With all the other X-Men nowhere to be found, it was Wolverine versus everyone, and he was taking 40 different villains to the grave. It was insane. When he finally took down the last one, who was Bullseye, the illusion actually lifted to reveal that these villains were in actuality all his fellow X-Men, who were just caught completely off guard by the sudden attack from one of their own. Now there are a few different characters who often appear in the Wolverine circle, the Wolverine family, you could call them if you wanted to, but if we are counting down a list of brutal moments for the character, then there is one person in particular who needs to be talked about, and his name is Sabretooth. Victor Creed seems to be bad simply because he enjoys it. As a kid, he took the life of his older brother Luther over a piece of pie, and was absolutely ruthless to his younger brother Saul, who he would make a habit of putting a beat down on, particularly on Saul's birthday. When his mutant powers manifested, it only made bringing harm to others even easier for him, and he eventually took out his own father before going on a rampage through 3 Canadian provinces at just 13 years old. He would would become a bit of a wanderer throughout his life, moving from different careers that allowed him to take advantage of his power in order to spill more blood. Now, he eventually turned his savagery towards Wolverine, who happened to have taken the life of Saul, Sabretooth's younger brother. Sabretooth, in a really sick way, replaced Saul with Wolverine, making it his goal to make Wolverine's life a living hell. On every one of Wolverine's birthdays, he would beat Wolverine to within an inch of his life, and anyone Wolverine welcomed into his life, like those he would fall in love with, also became Victor's newest victims. And speaking of that, Sabretooth doesn't only try to ruin Wolverine's life on his birthdays. Anyone in Wolverine's life can become a target for Sabretooth, and Daken was Wolverine's son, born from Logan's marriage to a woman named Itsu, and the boy inherited his father's mutant abilities, but none of his morality. So, in an attempt to gain revenge on his father, Daken teamed up with Sabretooth and the group known as the Red Right Hand, and the group's battle with X-Force culminated in Logan having to take the life of his own son. But with the powers of Wolverine, this is obviously no easy feat. Most people believe Wolverine is practically unkillable, but this is actually not entirely true. He does have one or two foolproof ways to bring him down, and one of them is water. With Daken leaving his pops no choice, Wolverine is kind of forced to hold his son face down in a puddle until he stops breathing. This moment is intercut with these flash imaginations that Wolverine is having of the life that they could have possibly shared together if things were a bit more normal. Now, just as Daken takes his final breath and Logan mournfully is holding his son, Sabretooth appears on the scene, revealing that this has been his intention since he first partnered with Daken. Needless to say, we kinda hate Sabretooth here.
The release of Deadpool 3, Deadpool and Wolverine, is getting closer. The new trailer just dropped, and I want to know, who do you want to see appear as a cameo in this movie? Captain America is a hero who was alluded to in the trailer that we just got for this movie, and I personally would love to see him included in the film himself. In the comics, he and Deadpool and Wolverine all have an adventure together known as the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. It's a really fun time seeing them all banter with one another and interact. And in addition to this, Deadpool is known as being a fanboy of Captain America in the comics. When Captain America was revealed to secretly be a sleeper agent for Hydra, Deadpool was one of the few that still followed him. Of course, at that time, he didn't know that Captain America was a sleeper agent for Hydra, but merely followed sinister orders from Cap that were given to him to take out Agent Coulson. He wanted to ask questions, but this was his hero, and he was told that the mission was basically on a need-to-know basis in terms of why he was doing what he was doing, so instead he didn't really ask and he kind of just followed orders, trusting Cap. Of course, this wasn't the real Cap, but a reality-altered version conjured up by the sentient cosmic cube, so no worries there. But Deadpool didn't know this either. Who would you love to see Deadpool team up with the most? Let me know in the comments. There's a few other people, some which are on this list, some which aren't, that I personally love when he teams up with them. Mystique is one of my favorite characters to see Wolverine with, and I feel like she might make an interesting addition to Deadpool and Wolverine. In the comics, she has a very close connection to Wolverine, and at one point she was actually also married to Deadpool. Yeah, this is because Mystique was basically undercover and it was kind of part of her mission, so the marriage wasn't necessarily sincere, but still it happened. Deadpool would also get it annulled shortly afterwards, but still, it could be fun to see all three of these characters on the screen together. The question is, would we want a new Mystique or to see Rebecca Romijn or Jennifer Lawrence return to the role? Personally, I would be down for all of the above, especially if this film is a lead into or involves Secret Wars as we believe it does based on some of the stuff we saw in the trailer. Cannonball is another member of the X-Force that I would love to see featured in Deadpool 3. We got a ton of X-Men related characters in Deadpool 2 thanks to the film founding its own version of the X-Force, which acted more like X-Statics in terms of their performance and in terms of some of the members that were on the team. Cannonball is Sam Guthrie, a super popular mutant among comic book fans who gets his codename from his power set. And while he is also super affiliated with the New Mutants, he's also been on the X-Force before. He can basically charge himself up with thermochemical energy and then release this energy to propel himself through the air like a cannonball, and also to blast people. What's more, even though most people weren't fans of this film itself, I did like a lot of the actors they got for the film New Mutants, so it is possible that Marvel could make a reference to that film with this cameo if they wanted. Although it kind of seemed like they kind of wanted to bury New Mutants, so I wouldn't be surprised if they simply didn't allude to it at all, or have anyone from it in this movie, but hey, few of us that like parts of it. I would like to see it. Copycat is Vanessa Carlyle, and you might be thinking, but wait a minute, Amanda, isn't Vanessa already in Deadpool? And my answer to that would be yes. Yes, she is. But she is not the Vanessa that we know from the comics, at least not as far as we've seen thus far. Instead, she appears to be a non-mutant version of this character, whereas in the comics, she is Deadpool's love interest, a shape-shifting mutant who's also kind of a little blue, like Mystique, who tragically died. But don't worry, she randomly got better, because this is Deadpool. She just randomly shows up one day and apparently she's alive again. Anything can happen in Deadpool. Cue hallucination of a fluffy unicorn flying around my head. This version of Vanessa that we have in the comics, known as Copycat, we have not seen in the MCU yet, but I'm hopeful that we could see this version of her in Deadpool 3. I'm cool with her being an alternate also played by Morena Baccarin, or with her being a completely new character, but having her in there as a nod to the comic version would certainly be neat. Gambit is just a super cool character. He has some fun interactions with Wolverine in the comics, and honestly outside of the comics as well. And he's a character that I've really wanted to see in live action again for some time. For a while there, I thought we might actually be getting a Gambit solo movie. Apparently we could have gotten one of those with Channing Tatum as Gambit, which would have been weird, but I would have just been down for a Gambit solo. But sadly, that never ended up happening, so anywhere I can take some more Gambit in my life, I'll take it. I really loved Domino in Deadpool 2. Now, I don't know if we could convince Zazie Beetz to come back as Domino. In fact, I don't think we can, as she actually said in an interview, she's not coming back. But at the same time, I wonder if this is all just her trying to cover up her involvement, pull the wool over our eyes. She did say she's interested to see what they do in Deadpool 3 though, so that implies that, she's probably still hyped about Deadpool, she's just not in this one. Or is she? I feel like it would have been really cool to bring her back as the character, considering Deadpool and Domino have a bit of a history in the comics. At one point, Domino is actually tasked with keeping an eye on Wade for the X-Men, so he doesn't mess up their image. They decide to make him an honorary X-Men member, basically just so they can keep an eye on him, and Domino is kind of like his holder at that time. In addition to this, Domino also has close ties to Cable, so it would be nice to see her also interact more with him if he returned in some capacity. They have a romance in the comics. Another character I'd love to see return in Deadpool 3, Deadpool and Wolverine, is, of course, Cable. Speaking of Cable, while I know we already saw Cable in Deadpool 2, that's just how much I like him. Cable in Deadpool 2 was played by Josh Brolin, and I'd love to see him return in this role. In the comics, Cable and Deadpool are good friends, but Deadpool also always gets on Cable's nerves. To be fair though, Wade gets on pretty much everybody's nerves. They have a fun dynamic, and I really enjoy their banter. If Josh Brolin, however, couldn't return as Cable, we also have the possibility of getting perhaps a young Cable cameo in Deadpool, which I'd also enjoy as a big young Cable fan, or Kid Cable fan, whatever you prefer. I know not everybody likes Kid Cable, but I personally am a really big fan of this character. I just love how confident he is. He's kind of like a young, hotshot version of the character. Cable could also help Deadpool get around if he needed to travel through time. Alternatively, Cable himself could also be a captive at the TVA for his interference with time. One of my favorite characters of all time, speaking of time, is Evil Deadpool. Why do I love him? Because, well, he's like Deadpool, but evil. It's also pretty funny that at one point people actually couldn't tell which Deadpool was the evil one and which was the good one, even though Evil Deadpool looks like this. Evil Deadpool is made up of a bunch of Deadpool's lost parts, which fused together after being collected by a psychologist who was obsessed with Wade, so collected all those pieces, but then they were later tossed out. His healing factor was so powerful that this caused the parts to come together and basically make a whole other Deadpool. Evil Deadpool. Evil Deadpool also once joined in on a plot to kill all Deadpools across the multiverse in a story known as Deadpool Kills Deadpool, a play on insert name, kill the Marvel Universe, which is something we've seen happen a few times over at Marvel Comics. This next character I really love. It's Bob. I love Bob, but we haven't seen him at all in Deadpool, and honestly, it's a travesty. While Weasel did appear in Deadpool and Deadpool 2, it's unlikely we'll see Weasel return in Deadpool and Wolverine due to multiple controversies involving TJ Miller, who plays the character. In fact, TJ Miller also confirmed that Weasel actually will not be in the sequel, which seems to confirm my theories here. However, that also opens up a spot for a new ally for Wade, although he does have his taxi driver friend, who we already saw return in the trailer, Depender. I think he has room for another sidekick pal, and Bob could be just that person for Deadpool. Or he could at least make, I don't know, a little cameo appearance, just I just want a little bit of Bob in my life. Bob in the comics was once a Hydra agent who ends up getting roped into helping Deadpool and ultimately becomes his sort of best friend. However, like many, Bob does eventually get frustrated by Deadpool's antics and constant reckless behavior, especially with Bob's own life, and later turns on him, like many of Deadpool's other allies do, at one point or another. A big question fans have been wondering about is who will take over for Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. Logan was meant to be the last film he'd be in as this character, but he was convinced by Ryan Reynolds to come back to the fold one more time to play Wolverine in Deadpool 3, Deadpool and Wolverine. While he agreed to do so, we don't know if this will be the same Logan from the Fox franchise or not. He could be playing an alternate version of Wolverine, but either way, someone will have to take over for him when this movie is done, if we're gonna have Wolverine in the MCU. A character a lot of fans have wanted to see for some time in this role is X-23, Laura Kinney. In the comics, Laura follows in her biological father's footsteps, eventually becoming the new Wolverine. So I personally feel like that would be a great fit for Wolverine and something different.
The Merc with a mouth is well loved for his smart wit and charming, unhinged nature, but don't let your guard down, Deadpool is as deadly as he is hilarious.
I know, right? Anyway, I got places to be. You know what to do.
Disagreeing with Deadpool is dangerous, even if it's just over movie opinions. In Deadpool, Merc with a Mouth 5, Deadpool blasts a guy for saying that the prequel Star Wars films are better than the original trilogy. Literally, the soldier says 2 sentences and then he never speaks again. Technically, Deadpool was probably eventually going to off the soldier anyways, as he was part of a secretly evil organization, but I still think that if I were ever to come face to face with Deadpool, any opinions I have of pop culture, I'll keep them to myself. In the record-breaking 2016 film Deadpool, a big focal point of the movie is Wade's relationship with his fiancée Vanessa. They are very much in love and she is more than capable of keeping up with Wade's wacky personality and humor. Unfortunately, when Wade gets the cancer diagnosis, he decides to leave Vanessa without warning. He did it so she wouldn't have to watch him die, and I get where he's coming from, but leaving in the middle of the night with no explanation isn't the best way to do it. Wade signs up for an experimental treatment. It's torture, basically. They are trying to wake up any dormant genes. Goodness, he actually has some and survives. At this point, Vanessa still doesn't really know what's happened with her fiance and finds out in maybe the worst way possible. The person who is torturing Wade kidnaps her and she's stuck in the middle of a bloody battle in a battered helicarrier. Eventually, the pair reconcile after it all ends. If something is going to help or benefit Deadpool or someone he loves in some way, Deadpool's going to take or do it. In Deadpool Volume 3, Issue 4, Wade Wilson finds out that everything in him has broken down. His healing factor isn't working as well and getting worse every day. Wade has a serious form of cancer and the only thing keeping him alive is the healing factor. Without it, he's dead, no pool. There is hope though. He has high amounts of gamma radiation that has slowed down his cellular degeneration. To fix that, he needs to get the gamma radiation into every part of him to balance out all the energy. The quickest way is to find gamma radiation that is attached to an organic base so that it will merge with the body better. Basically, he needs Hulk's blood. When he gets to the Hulk, he comes out a little strong. The Hulk is not willing to give up his blood, so the pair battle it out. The thing with the Hulk is, you can attack him as much as you want, but it's hard to make him bleed. Deadpool makes the Hulk a pincushion, trying to get the red stuff, or in the Hulk's case, the green stuff. Until finally, Deadpool uses a very big, broken, sharp pipe. Deadpool gets what he was coming for. Ouch. It turns out that it doesn't really matter who you are. If Deadpool needs you in the line of battle, you're at the front. Even his own daughter. This villain called Madcap was running around the city pretending to be Deadpool, creating chaos and dragging Deadpool's name through the mud. The only person allowed to do that is Deadpool, so this Madcap guy, he's gotta go. But how do you lure someone like that out? To steal an example from Deadpool, remember in Jaws when they put blood in the water? This time, the blood is Deadpool's very young daughter. There is a plan in place, so when Madcap shoots at her, in comes our boy Quicksilver to transport her to safety. So she's fine. She gets taken to a car that will transport her and her mother to a safe house far, far away. But it could have easily not been fine. Personally, I don't think I could put my own family in harm's way like that, but I guess that's why I'm not the Merc with a mouth. After you're reassured the kid is safe, cut back to Deadpool and there are bullet holes in the wall where his daughter just was. It was a close call. We were a couple milliseconds away from a disaster, or possibly even an Age of Ultron kind of ending for Quicksilver. Hearing the word Hydra as a Marvel fan, you immediately kind of go, oh, this person is a bad guy. But that's not always the case. What would you do to support your family? Turns out some guy named Bob would join Hydra for the benefits and a stable paycheck. To be clear, Hydra Bob is not 100% on board with Hydra or their mission, but he is all in for the dental care. Deadpool found him one day while he was in a bind and forced Bob to help him out, and from that day forward, a beautiful and destructive friendship was born. While Deadpool isn't always the one hurting Bob, he is usually part of the reason why Bob is stuck in the fight anyway. Deadpool has gotten the poor guy shot multiple times, multiple places, chased by dinosaurs, and even been the cause of giving him scurvy when they played pirates and then got lost at sea for 6 weeks. There has been a lot of mental trauma too. We have to remember that Bob is just a guy, a regular human guy, even described as a cowardly human guy. So having to reattach Deadpool's head, plus have everything happen to you that was previously listed, I hope Hydra's benefits included therapy. Deadpool, if you are listening, please release my man Bob, please stop hurting him. Deadpool is a major Captain America fan, which is a good thing because the Captain is a very good role model, he's a very good citizen, a positive influence on Deadpool. But there was that weird time in Cap's life that no one likes to talk about, the Hydra phase. Hydra Captain America having a super fan Deadpool at his disposal is a thing of nightmares. It is also the reason why Agent Phil Coulson's life was cut short. Agent Coulson originated in the cinematic universe and he was a quick fan favorite, so loved that he entered the comic universe. In Deadpool Volume 6, Issue 27, Coulson starts to rightfully grow suspicious of Captain America and begins to investigate him. Cap, of course, finds out and sends out Deadpool to take care of Coulson. Deadpool holds the Captain in such high regard that he doesn't even question the mission, he just gets it done. It's brutal because Agent Coulson is a well-loved character, but also if he hadn't died, maybe everything wouldn't have been so terrible later. There's no mind control here or anything. Deadpool literally just did it because he adores Captain America so much. It's great to have heroes, but you can't just follow them blindly like this. Coulson, you will be missed, but not for long. He was revived in 2019. It pretty much goes without saying, but here I go again. Deadpool has limited morals. If it benefits him, he's gonna do what he needs to do. In this particular case, it involves a completely innocent civilian. In Deadpool Volume 5, Issue 11, Deadpool is going after a shapeshifter. This is tough because the shapeshifter makes it look like Deadpool is trying to attack superheroes. That looks like a problem, so in steps Daredevil. At one point, Daredevil is chasing Deadpool, who is chasing the actual bad guy. To get Daredevil off his back, Wade Wilson chooses probably the worst option and shoots a random innocent guy in the leg. Not a fatal shot, but it could have been fatal if the guy was not taken to the hospital immediately. Deadpool knows that Daredevil is going to stop and help the man, but still, what did my man do other than be in the wrong place at the wrong time? These last 3 points are just Deadpool attacking everyone. All the heroes we know and love, Deadpool took care of them. All took place in Deadpool Kills the Multiverse. You know what you're getting into with a title like that. Deadpool has gone insane and the X-Men take him to a doctor, but surprise, the doctor is a bad guy with affinity for brainwashing. The doctor tried to brainwash Deadpool, but only ended up destroying his inner voices and replacing them with one voice that knew the universe was a lie and super adamant Deadpool and everyone. Bye bye doctor and all the heroes we know and love. The tough part for our heroes is that it's very hard to kill a Deadpool. Every time they thought they won, he would just regenerate and come back. I don't think I can describe much of what exactly Deadpool did to everyone. Anything you can come up with, it probably happened. The amount of unhinged, disturbing things Deadpool does while plowing through the ranks of Marvel heroes is disturbing. At one point, after killing all the X-Men, he wore Beast as a fur coat while fighting Wolverine. Wearing someone as a coat, already incredibly messed up, but when you smack onto that he's wearing your friend, at that point, take me out. I'm done. No amount of therapy is ever fixing that. Wolverine did get taken out, and his healing factor wasn't helping him this time. Deadpool wins. He even finds the writers who, if Deadpool got everyone else, there's no way those guys stand a chance. And it turns out, our universe is next. Stressful. Deadpool Killustrated is a similar idea, comes right after, but instead of limiting himself to just Marvel, Deadpool branches out to what he believes are the sources of Marvel characters, other literary characters. Deadpool's first round of painting the universe red didn't stick, apparently. In order to stop the constant cycle of death and resurrection and suffering, Deadpool travels to other universes to eliminate classic characters. If those classic characters never existed, then creators wouldn't have been inspired, and then comic characters would have no base, and then therefore disappear. If he can't get to the heroes themselves, then he can at least end the idea of them. So Deadpool goes into the nexus of all realities on a mission to that. He takes out beloved characters like Moby Dick, Dracula, the characters of Little Women, and Pinocchio, plus more. Quite heartbreaking, because what chance did the Little Women ever have against the Mouth? Though Deadpool completely destroys destroyed everything, Sherlock Holmes saved it because he made sure to remember it all. So because one person remembered the stories could come alive again. There is a third round in the Kilogy. Deadpool kills Deadpool. Technically, the Deadpool that was acting out this whole time wasn't the Deadpool we know. It was one from a different universe that had been driven beyond the brink of madness, believing himself to be nothing more than a fictional character. He set out on a quest of destruction. This time, he came to the conclusion that in order to end his own suffering, he had to lure out the beings that created realities for entertainment by ending everybody's lives. Again, the only thing is no one was coming forward, and at a certain point, he deduced that because Deadpool was the only one who knew the worlds were fictional, then Deadpool must be the source, the beings he's looking for. So now he's added all the Deadpools to his destroy list. He pretty much succeeds, only 2 Deadpools are left standing by the end of it all, and he's not one of them. Honestly, I'm glad. I don't think my brain handled trying to together any more of this.